All right, so this is something that we were gonna kind of do. For the longest time, the idea was to do just the first Austin Powers and Get Smart, like the Steve Carell movie.
Hmm.
But I th- I think it was it you that said like, why don't we just do the trilogy? Because it would be, because it feels more complete or something.
Well, that I didn't have access to Get Smart anywhere.
Yeah, and I don't know how. I know this is sacrilege to say on Owen's channel, but I don't know that I'm that passionate about Get Smart.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, and I think you said you had just rewatched these not that long ago.
Yeah.
And even if you hadn't, it's like you don't need to have watched these recently to talk about them extensively because
Hmm.
we just know them so well. Hopefully my lighting doesn't look too shit. The thing I usually use another thing that has burned out that I just noticed right before we started, so hopefully I don't look too ghoulish. But
Really, mine's lit like I'm in a Bond villain lair.
which is weird because when we did the videos in that room while I was there, the lighting was perfect.
See, this would have been the perfect lighting for the villains video.
Because we just look sinister.
Hmm.
So I guess to kind of sum up um, the Austin Powers movies would be to say that I feel like over the years, me and you slowly came to the same conclusion based on our conversations previously, where it's like, yeah, because sometimes we just talk about Austin Powers apparently.
Hmm.
Yeah, based on the discussions we have about Austin Powers of all things before, um, when it first started, because we hadn't hit our Bond phase just yet when the first movie came out. Really, it was probably right around the time the second one was coming out. We kind of hit our Bond phase because that would have been when the world's not enough was out.
Hmm.
And the thing was, as the movies came out more, the more over the top they got, and kind of is when you look at it compared to the first movie, while there's definitely a lot of the Bond stuff and a lot of Bond in jokes in the second and third movie, they kind of strayed away from it a little more than they did in the first movie, and just kind of became their own over the top comedies with their own sort of world of characters and setup and all that. And at that time, we seemed to like them more as they came out. Like we always liked the second one more than the first one. And then when Goldmember came out, I remember Goldmember was like the funniest thing ever when it came out.
Hmm.
And now that we've gone back, I feel like we both used to think our ranked order best to worst would have been reverse chronological order. But now that we're older, it seems to be chronological order, best to worst. Do you get that?
I still have a really big soft spot for the second one.
Yeah,
But
but
it's funny, like the way that you mentioned, like how it started as like a direct spoof of Bond and kind of grew up into this thing. It's kind of like a less intense version of what happened with the Scary Movie franchise, where like they started specifically with spoofing horror movies and then just spoofed everything.
yeah. How the first scary movie was just screaming I know what you did last summer, and then everything else was a little bonus.
Hmm.
It's like by the time we got to the sequels, it was like divided equally between 20 movies.
Hmm.
Um,
And not even just that, but like real life moments. Like there was a spoof of when Tom Cruise jumped on the couch on Oprah.
yeah, which Scary Movie 4 is not great, but that scene still works for me.
But like it's kind of too where like an age where spoofing is almost like between the Scary Movie franchise and like the Freeberg and Seltzer movies, like they're not it's not popular anymore. Like Austin Powers and the first Scary Movie, the first two Scary movies were kind of like the last gasp of it because like Mel Brooks isn't making movies anymore. He was always great at it. Um, I had another one in mind. I can't remember what I was going to say. Airplane.
Obviously, Airplane's like the blueprint for everything. It's the blueprint, but it's also never been surpassed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I would still say, like with all the spoof, I would still say the greatest spoof movie of all time to me is Young Frankenstein. But
because which even predates Airplane. Yeah,
Mhm.
because it's the thing to where it's like because it kind of did because it's a weird comparison now, but Young Frankenstein did what essentially Scary Movie ended up doing, which was they tell the exact same story of two different movies and in kind of a brilliant way combines them into one movie like
Mhm.
in their own way with their own story, even though they're literally scene for scene the same movies they're parodying,
Mhm.
but it's they somehow made their own thing by combining two different things where like Young Frankenstein is literally what would happen if Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein were just one movie,
Mhm.
which is amazing. And then the same
Plus,
thing,
plus, Young Frankenstein has the distinct advantage of having Gene Wilder.
yeah, who's literally performing like he's in one of the classic movies and not a
Mhm.
comedy.
He takes himself so seriously in it; it's hilarious.
How much do you feel like Mike Myers accomplished that? Because it's pretty blatantly clear Austin Powers is a character that's in a comedy,
Mhm.
but there's also some moments in the first movie that he takes pretty seriously,
Mhm.
like the whole montage where he has to come to terms with the fact of the times changing,
That's a pretty heavy concept for a comedy.
and not for a comedy like this, especially.
Yeah, and it takes that seriously. Like the only joke in that whole scene is when he ends it with saying, "I can't believe Liberace was gay."
Yeah, and deceased ham sandwich.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like him saying he didn't know Liberace was gay. Yeah, it's a joke in the context of the movie, but it's also something you could totally believe his character being shocked by.
Yeah, and it's almost like when he says women loved him. It's like he's questioning himself, like his entire identity.
Hmm. I mean, they try that again in the second one when he finds out that Heather Graham slept with Fat Bastard, but it's and the first one handles it really well. Like even having Vanessa come back and kind of being remorseful, being like, sometimes I forget this is tough for you.
Yeah,
Like it's a pretty well done scene for a comedy. Like I know one of your big things is you hate when comedy goes dramatic, when you point at Judd Apatow and say stop it.
yeah.
But like this is a case where I feel like it was done well.
I think it was. I think also because there was that balance there,
Hmm.
where it was like you had moments where it didn't go like straight full on serious because you had moments like deceased ham sandwich.
Oh, we almost forgot the shoe and playing the CD on the record player.
Yeah, and it's still playing the sad music in the background during those moments.
But at the same time, that's something that you could see somebody in real life in that situation trying to do.
Yeah,
Like that's not an over the top response. That's something that you could clearly see a real person doing, trying to put a CD player or a CD in a record player. Fuck, Drew Barrymore wanted to do it in The Wedding Singer, and Glenn had to stop her.
I was gonna say it reminds me of the montage in Defending Your Life when they're showing Albert Brooks all of his miscalculations in life,
Mm-hmm.
and which is like the funniest scene and one of the funniest scenes in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then like it's in the middle of this moment, but it's like they leave just enough of that comedic room to where it's not jarring to have this serious scene and then go right back into the over the top comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's where it kind of. Do you think that's the kind of thing that's kind of missing in the second, and definitely in the third?
Mm-hmm.
The third does have the moment when he and Michael Caine finally get real with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but still, it's never quite reaches that whole sequence in the middle of the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
That actually gives it like its like that, like that's what we were saying, where it's like it's clear everything's a Bond parody, but at some point in parody you have to find your own identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the moment when when the movie kind of becomes its own thing. And then by the end, we're literally doing the end of Doctor No, and we're right back where we were.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how do you feel about how it handles the parody? Because it's like when you look at what parody is, like say when Airplane was doing Zero Hour, and it was literally every single scene from that movie just with silly lines or silly things in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you fast forward to the Freeberg and Seltzer era where it was literally do the exact same scene, only have somebody get hit by a car or drop something heavy on them
Some
or
kind
something.
of pratfall.
Yeah. Did we almost reach like kind of a middle ground here? Where like I think about how there's some really clever things in here and some of the Bond references. Like one thing that almost feels obscure when you're talking about the other um, comedic bits they're doing or references or whatever is Mr. Roboto in Goldmember. Like most people will think the only reason that joke exists is to make a reference to the song.
Mm-hmm.
But Mr. Roboto is also clearly a reference to Mr. Osato from You Only Live Twice.
Mm-hmm.
He even suffers the same fate. I think, or close to it. There was the whole piranha thing going on in You Only Live Twice. But then you have stuff and that feels like kind of a deep cut to me. Because like, how many mainstream audiences are going to remember Mr. Osato from You Only Live Twice?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have stuff like when he's wearing the Dr. No suit at the end of the first movie, and he like slips out of the chair or whatever he does.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the way you have these, you combine the deep cuts with the more slapsticky stuff, and there's somehow a perfect balance that's found at times. But there's also times where they kind of get a bit lost in the references. I feel like we could say a lot of good things about 2.
Mm-hmm.
2 is very reference heavy.
Mm-hmm.
To various different things. And I don't know how.
There's one thing I want to go back to at the end of the first one with the Dr. No reference. There is one joke. I didn't really find it that funny when I was younger, but now I find it hilarious. Is like the countdown to self-destruct. There's actually a guy counting it down, and we see that he's like fucked up from what's going on.
Completely unfazed.
Yeah. Like I don't know what made me remember that, but like when I was a kid, like I didn't think anything of that, but now as an adult, that's very funny to me. They actually have a guy counting down, and he like is impacted by the environment, but he's so dedicated to his job he doesn't leave.
And the joke makes sense because it's like
he's gonna die there counting down.
I was gonna say the joke makes sense that he's that focused on his job because he's obviously willing to die to do it. It's like, of course, his environment's going to have no impact on him whatsoever.
You never thought anything about it till now, did you?
Nope. And that's what I love about doing this, is we've now, like, unraveled this like an onion. Just the one shot of this dude counting. We now know his whole psyche going into this job. It's like when we pulled apart Hendrickson from Honey, I Blew Up the Kid for, like, 15 minutes. But yeah, how do you feel about some like I feel like I have mixed feelings on the unrelated references. Like that might seem like deep cuts, so they feel so random in something like this. But I don't know whether to admire that or just go like, God, they're really reaching for reference. Like they're not even telling jokes anymore. They're just doing references now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't know for a long time about the joke in the second one when Dr. Evil pulls out the globe and he's bouncing it and hitting Rob Lowe with it and saying like, "You're gonna cry," is the thing from The Great Santini. It's a really famous scene where Robert Duvall's playing with Michael O'Keefe and he's doing that exactly, saying the exact lines and hitting him with the basketball and all that stuff. It's like one of the most famous scenes involving a father and son in movie history, but I didn't pick up on that when I saw the second one.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. There's a great episode of Roseanne where during the end credits of an episode where because Michael O'Keefe is actually on that show and it's he and Dan playing basketball and Goodman's doing a perfect Duvall impression and Michael O'Keefe is like recreating his own scene.
Because of course John Goodman could do a perfect Robert Duvall impression. Because John Goodman is one of the most underappreciated actors ever.
And it's like, so now that you know that, it is funny that a reference that random is in an Austin Powers movie, right?
It is like like you would think there'd be more references. Like, I'm sorry, I love the Thunderball reference.
You're gonna have to be more specific.
The scene where like he sees the killer reflected in her eye.
Yeah. The Kevin Durant scene.
Yeah.
Yes, that is very well handled. I feel like that's half Thunderball and half Goldfinger. I feel like because isn't it in Thunderball he just uses her as the shield. It's Goldfinger where he sees the reflection in her eye, which is another thing where it's like it's a very clever combining of two different references.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the way that escalate, that's a great way of using escalation. And yes, my favorite part of that scene is. Are our favorite parts of that scene the same one?
When they're falling and he just pulls her in front of him.
Yeah, it's time to register what he's gonna do. And I do just love the exasperation and why won't you die?
Does she ever die?
When he's firing down, maybe. She looked pretty still, but
see, I think it's funny that that's such a good example of it there. But a half hour later, when they try to do it with Will Ferrell's character, it peters.
Yeah. Do you think that has anything to do with it being a continuation of a joke from the first movie? It's like they're already continuing a joke from the first movie, while at the same time feeling like a faint echo of a separate joke that they just did. It's like it was never gonna work out for Will Ferrell's scene in 2.
I think another side of that coin too is they just came off of a pretty good joke where after they ask him 3 times, he gives the answer.
Yeah, maybe. Now I really studied that scene the last time I saw it. Because as a kid, I always got lost. Which I'm assuming is part of the joke. That it's for some reason really needlessly complicated. That's the joke. But I still don't quite get the whole thing of what the trick was they were trying to pull. Doesn't seem to make sense. And what he says happened doesn't. I don't know. I don't get that scene. But if that's the joke that neither one of them is logical, then okay.
I just love that like he explains it and then they directly use it. And then like when they ask him a 3rd time, he just goes, damn, 3 times. Like he didn't know it was coming.
Yeah.
What always got me was where they were trying to skirt around his little rule. It would have been faster just to ask him 3 times.
Yeah. I get there's another thing. We talked about how the second one came out the same year as The World Is Not Enough. And we were talking about references that are totally unrelated to Bond and Austin Powers. This is another combining of things, but it's another case also. Were they doing it too much? Because obviously, one of the big jokes going into this was that it didn't seem to matter at all. Like I remember this vividly, even though I was only like 8 at the time. It didn't seem to matter to them at all that a Bond movie was coming out the same year. all of the focus was on the fact that the Phantom Menace was coming out the same year.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember that teaser. I still vividly remember seeing that teaser trailer in the theater for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
If you see one movie this year, see the Phantom Menace. But if you see two movies this year, see.
Mm-hmm.
And they really went in on the space thing. But once again, you can say it makes sense because they have Moonraker.
Mm-hmm.
They can make references to, but it's like, how much of it feels like Moonraker and how much of it feels like there was a whole joke devoted to the fact that Star Wars was coming out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like they made it in, like, there was enough Moonraker present to where it didn't feel like we were going in a totally opposite direction?
Not to mention the fact that we got there through time travel.
Yeah.
Although I do love the little joke where he's time traveled back to save Heather Graham, and he has to feed Dr. Evil his line.
Yeah.
And I love that Dr. Evil not only acknowledges it, but thanks him.
And there was the whole thing, talking about the time travel, was given the kind of character that Austin Powers is.
Mm-hmm.
When I was watching the first one back, and it starts in 1967. It's like, obviously they're doing a 30 years thing because the first one came out in 97.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I thought it was like extremely good restraint for them to not make it 1969.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the kind of person Austin Powers is. You think that'd be the clearest joke possible if you're studying the movie in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, did they know that a sequel would come along where they could put plenty of focus on 1969? But do they ever make a joke about that?
No.
That is incredible restraint on their part, given the kind of character Austin Powers is.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that very commendable, weirdly enough.
I have to say, my favorite part of 1969 is Rob Lowe's Robert Wagner impression.
Yeah, because wasn't he like dating his daughter at the time or something?
I think.
So it was like, it was awkward, but at the same time, a perfect reason for why he'd have a perfect Robert Wagner impression. What do you think about the joke following the events of the first movie that number 2 is just back? There's just no explanation whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Even the burn mark on his face makes little sense.
But going back to talking about the villains, in the first one, like, I thought the villains are a lot better in the first one with some of the jokes they use. Like, of course, Odd Job's parallel being called Random Task. And then really one of the only references outside of Bond in the first one when the Irish villain says, "Yeah, they're always after me, Lucky Charms."
Yeah. And that's weird because that joke shouldn't be as funny as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, it's just a pop culture reference.
It is.
But there's just something, and you would think this would make it worse, but somehow they made dragging that out as far as they could somehow funnier. Because that's the worst thing you can do. Those are the two of the worst things you can do, is trying to get a laugh with a pop culture reference and try to laugh by just dragging something out for as long as it can go. It works if it works, but most of the time,
this character hits a trifecta of things that are usually a dead end with the Tom Arnold scene later.
I unapologetically love the Tom Arnold scene. I love everything about that scene. I love the start of it when he opens the door and hits the blind guy with it, and we don't even see that happen on screen.
I believe the guy lets out a yell too.
That's the only way you know it happens.
We also didn't address the joke in the first one of the evil laugh, like what happens when it's over.
Yeah, that's one of the classic jokes from this movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one where, like, I struggle to think that joke could have been too long,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like they cut it off at just the right time.
See, I think the difference between the first one compared with the other two is the other two you can kind of remember funny moments, but the first one has so many classic jokes: the evil laugh, the Tom Arnold scene, the steamroller.
Yes. I want to talk about the steamroller. Before we do, going back to the laugh, it's also worth noting there's a lot of jokes in this that I like to really appreciate, even if they feel cliche.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like the reason they're cliche now is because it feels like a lot of them come from people referencing this particular movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if that joke is cliche now, it's not the movie's fault. Like it was fresh at the time. And so
Mm-hmm.
I tend to I try to take myself back to imagine I'm seeing this joke for the first time and I'm able to think it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I think I especially like when Dr. Evil's laugh is finally done because he's the last one who like kind of dies down.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of lets out that breath, like it's like laughing like that has taken a lot out.
Going back to the Tom Arnold scene real quick, would you put the Tom Arnold scene up there with the bar scene in Back to the Future 3 and call it the gift that keeps on giving?
It is like when you really break like because it's a scene we know so well now. It just feels like one big joke.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, let's really break down how many separate jokes happen in quick succession during this scene. One that just goes by really quickly is are you in the show? No, actually I'm English.
Mm-hmm.
Just the delivery on that words. And then there's the whole thing where was Austin's plan to even go, or was he just doing what Tom Arnold was doing, or because he was in there to look for somebody had just gone in there.
Number 2,
Yeah, that's right.
who's just not there.
That's the thing with number 2. He can just come and go in any particular time. He can just come back from the dead with no explanation. He can just disappear with no explanation. Oh man, we didn't even mention the blackjacks.
I love the fact that when like that the music stays the same when the dealer's like 5. The soup Nazi's his dealer.
Yeah. For some reason, and tell me, that's a whole funny sequence. Is him staying at 5 and the dealer like really going in like, I suggest you hit, sir. Is the funniest joke of that whole scene just 20 beats your 5.
And the way he just looks at him like when he's like, I'm sorry, sir.
Oh.
And then we get another joke where he has the most conspicuous names of all time.
And then we and we straight we're just that's the thing is there's it feels like there's so many jokes packed into 2 and 3 that it always made 1 feel really
like
yeah, like not a lot of jokes were happening.
There's a lot of really subtle ones though too.
I was gonna say when you go back to the first one, the jokes are constant.
Yeah, because we go right
really,
from that blackjack scene right into a Bond spoof with a lot of vagina.
yeah, and then I believe that takes us right into our beloved Tom Arnold scene.
Yeah. Maybe the second and third one just needed a little dash of Tom Arnold. We forgot to mention the funniest part that Tom Arnold is not, he's alarmed at the man in the toilet, not because there's a man in the toilet, because he thinks that that's what happened in there.
That's the thing is, that's the dumbest joke ever. And it's hilarious. It's
Because Tom
still
Arnold sells it so well. A lot of people give Tom Arnold shit, but Tom Arnold can be damn funny.
I know, it always bums me out when people give him shit. Like, I mean, I guess I get it, but I kind of love it.
Yeah, because you've always been a fan of Big Bully. You're a big fan of Big Bully.
Once again, unapologetically. Carpool is hilarious. I do not stand by the stupids. I can't stand by the stupids, but
What about him in True Lies?
yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
He's what opened up True Lies to how kind of over, like, how you're supposed to take True Lies like only at face value about how over the top and silly it is.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the perfect gateway to that because he's starting off with the comedy relief immediately.
Mm-hmm.
He's invaluable. But
I feel like Tom Arnold's gonna come across this video and be like, "Finally, somebody gets me."
yes, we are out here, Tom Arnold. Don't be discouraged. Again, talking about other references, we didn't bring up another one that came to me very late in life. That's also extremely obvious. The whole opening credit sequence, being the opening credit sequence to A Hard Day's Night, like frame for frame, and the way they were able to make that their own thing. Like, A Hard Day's Night's opening is obviously extremely iconic, but now so is an Austin Powers opening. Like any of them. And the fact that song too is a song that Quincy Jones has had since like the 60s. I always assumed it was an original for the movie when I first saw it, and then I heard it in Rod Steiger's movie The Pawnbroker, and I was like, what the hell? That was the first time I realized that song did not originate from Austin Powers. I think Soul Bossa Nova is the name of it.
But then again, with the third one, there's a lot of pop culture references in it. We take a Britney Spears break.
Yeah.
We see, although the thought of Steven Spielberg doing repeated backflips is entertaining. Yeah.
And to their credit, for unfortunately the worst reason possible, Britney, especially now, Britney Spears is still extremely relevant.
Yeah.
I said it sucks for the reasons at the moment, but I mean, even then, she's still always been relevant.
Yeah.
So it could have been a lot worse. There could have been a lot worse choices in, what was that, 2002, 2003, 2002. I think.
Yeah.
People that would have been like long past relevance at this point.
Let's not forget too that the third one starts with a joke that you and I used to always make that actually made its way into a movie, where people that have Oscars just take them to set with them and show them off.
And I don't know if I love that joke or if that joke drives me crazy, because it's like, is it funny that he says my friend here thinks it's fine the way it is? But at the same time, I was like, why didn't he have both of them? He should have. He has two to show off. He should have shown off both of them. Or is it three? He's got two director Oscars. I can't remember if he produced Schindler's List or not, in which case he'd have three. But I don't remember off the top of my head. But,
well, the two would have made more sense because he was showing off his directing skills.
Yeah. And that's another case where it's like, I'm sure it's happened before, but the place that I point my finger is Zoolander 2. Celebrity cameos, especially unexpected ones, used to be the best thing ever. And they have like so worn out, like they're not surprising anymore.
Remember how great it was when Tim Robbins popped up in Anchorman?
Yeah.
Which is so crazy that you point to Zoolander 2 because the first Zoolander does it so well.
Yeah. It's like they were always trying to top their Bowie moment in the first one, and they never got that far. But I think it's another thing though. I think is like, I guess you could go into the whole debate about where movie stardom is right now versus where it would have been in the early 2000s or before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's one thing to get a celebrity cameo, but when the cameo is Tom Cruise, is a whole different story.
And then a minute later, you get Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, and even Paltrow would have been humongous at the time, or enormous, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Any movie with the three of them, like in a serious part, probably would have been like an Oscar contender. And here they are just dicking off for 30 seconds.
and then all of that in mind, we saw Goldmember a bunch of times in theaters.
I think we
And
watched it opening night.
yeah, and I don't know about you, but every single time I saw it, after everything we just said, Danny DeVito always got the biggest laugh.
Mm-hmm. And he goes completely against the character as soon as he's seen because Mini-Me doesn't speak.
I think that's the thing. Like, not only is it Danny DeVito, but the fact that Mini-Me is an otherwise silent character apart from the ease.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just, I feel like even before the camera fully shows him, he's already screaming, "Hey, ass!"
Are we supposed to? I've never been able to figure this out. Are we supposed to assume that Mini-Me is a take on Hervé Villechaize from Man with the Golden Gun?
I feel like it's got to be in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously we got the clone thing in Diamonds Are Forever. So I'm assuming it's a combination of those two things. Because that's the thing is
Once
like,
again, we're combining references here.
I was gonna say, the more you look into it, the more you can tell like the number of times they did that, took two references and put them together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say there's got to be obviously Knickknack's got to be in there at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he has the fate of Hugo Drax.
What do you think of the beginning of the second one, of how they just write Elizabeth Hurley out of the story?
I like the fact that, because usually I like the way they played that up, because it's like usually the whole joke is Bond just goes from one girl to the next with no explanation whatsoever.
Which he did between 2 and 3.
And I like the idea that Elizabeth Hurley's actually in this.
Mm.
Like, we actually get the scene with her that writes her out.
Not only that, but she's one of those rare cases where her name pops up in the credits after she's gone.
And then the whole thing where Basil says, "Yes, we knew all along," sadly. It's like, so what does that say about Mimi Rogers? Like, because you want to go into the whole thing of, okay, so was Vanessa ever real?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was Vanessa a real person that they eventually made a fembot from? But then it's like, that's one of those cases where you catch yourself and you're like, it doesn't. That's the joke. End of story.
What do you think of Michael York in these movies?
I don't know why. I do love when we see him in the 60s in the first movie. He has the exact hair he did in the 60s. He looks exactly like he did in Romeo and Juliet.
His name is also a joke.
Yeah, which is once again something else that like in the 90s, I wouldn't have been able to pick up on terms like exposition.
Mm-hmm.
And I it's like, and then the whole thing that his mom's name is Mrs. Exposition. I do think they missed a joke there.
Mm.
I do think when they introduced his mom, she should have just given some like really blatant information to the plot before they did the bit where he mistakes her for a man. Mm. Just to keep up with the joke that she's Mrs. Exposition.
I kind of love that it's not explained why she's there.
I may just have realized that she was only there for that joke.
Yeah, the only reason she was there was to the only way that she's brought in is because he just says, "I want you to meet my mother," and then we go right into it.
Speaking of, am I mistaken, or is there like an intentionally blatant difference where the setup to that joke during the opening credits of the first movie are still going on, and
Mhm.
that waitress is there that ends up being the dude, and he punches the waitress, and Mimi Rogers is like, that's a woman, and then when it cuts to him and he says no, it's a man, and pulls the wig off, wasn't it definitely an actress when she was the
Mhm.
waitress? And it's totally not. That guy is somebody we've never seen before.
He even has like a 5 o'clock shadow.
It's like that's a joke I never really thought about, where I was like, that's a really good joke. uh, um, I wrote some notes down here, but I don't think I've really mentioned anything. I feel like we've been rolling along pretty well as it is. We might have touched on some things. I mentioned, number two came back. There's the whole thing about have you ever heard anything about a potential feud between Mike Myers and Dana Carvey?
No.
Where it's very clear when you know that because obviously Dr. Evil is made up after Donald Pleasance's Blofeld in You Only Live
Mhm.
Once. But he clearly, very clearly has the voice of Lorne Michaels. Apparently there was some potential feud. I don't know. Howard Stern asked Dana Carvey about it, but I can't remember exactly what he said or if there was any bad blood or whatever. But that it wasn't. It was less Mike Myers doing an impression of Lorne Michaels when he was playing Dr. Evil, but it was Mike Myers doing Dana Carvey's impression of Lorne Michaels when he played Dr. Evil.
Mhm.
And how Dana Carvey kind of basically got no credit for how famous Dr. Evil is now.
I've heard though that Mike Myers is quite difficult to work with.
There's a lot of horror stories about that Penelope Spheres had about working on Wayne's World.
Mhm.
That's one of those things where you never know what's real and what's blown out of proportion. But I guess it was also Penelope Spheres' daughter, I guess, relayed a lot of this stuff from being on the set and seeing it.
Mhm.
But it's always hard to tell like how much of that is true and how much the person is mellowed out and stuff like that. Because you hear a lot of bad things about you used to hear a lot of bad things about people that are like really mellow now.
Mhm.
Not that excutes being a dick, but
Mhm.
I don't know like how much to dwell on it or not.
Plus, with like social media and stuff, like look how big the Christian Bale thing blew up. But everything that you hear other than that is that he's relatively easy to work with.
I think a lot of people have said Mike Myers was a dick up to a certain point, and then the Love Guru was just a massive ball kick of humbleness.
Hmm.
And then I guess since then he's been a bit more grateful about his opportunities and the people that'll work with him. He has a great story he talked about on Rob Lowe's podcast about how thrilled he was to be in Bastards.
Yeah.
So I would hope that he's more humble now. Like we were saying, I think the Love Guru probably did it.
Mhm.
Because I mean, imagine being able to come away from Saturday Night Live and they say like, a lot of people on Saturday Night Live won't go anywhere, or they try to make movies and they fail. They try to make movies based on their SNL characters and they fail. He took Wayne Campbell, made two extremely successful movies that were both loved, and then was able to make a whole other series all his own after that with this.
Mhm.
It's like that's a lot. That's a lot of success, and then to have Shrek come in the middle of these.
Mhm. I
That,
often wonder. I still kind of wonder though what Shrek would have done for Farley's career.
yeah, I guess for a while there, that's what Mike Myers had. No, Mike Myers seems to more so trying to be like kind of a character actor now.
Mhm.
Every now and then another Shrek will come along.
Mhm.
Well, I guess we're like 11 years out from the last Shrek, which is wild. But
Mhm.
what do you we haven't talked about Scott yet. and how Scott's kind of like Scott's the person watching the Bond movies and calling out the villains for their stupidity and their monologuing and their terrible traps.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's another case where it's like Scott is a great character to have in 1997?
Mm-hmm.
Because you watched all those Bond movies and all that stuff, but nobody in the movies was saying that. Do you think Scott's like really laying it on thick these days when you watch it back, especially in the later movies?
Yeah, I would say so.
He's really laying it on thick, because I feel like, because I would have been 11 when Goldmember came out if it was summer of 2002,
Mm-hmm.
which I think it was, or close to that, and I wasn't getting too many, like the Preparation H joke was kind of going over my head, but I was kind of able to figure it out through the context clues of Scott saying, yes, Preparation H does feel good. A lot of emphasis on the whole, even though Dr. Evil literally just said that. So people that get the Preparation H joke, it's funny when Dr. Evil just says, yes, on the whole, I think Preparation H feels good. You can just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
When you do know the joke, when you're older than 11, which is probably all it takes, Scott almost kind of seems unnecessary, doesn't he?
Yeah, but I think he has one thing in each movie that really works for me. In the first one, it's his run when he runs away. In the second one, it's just his appearance in general, because he's gone like super emo.
Yeah.
And then in the third one, his hysterical evil laugh gets me.
Are you sure you're not thinking of the run in Goldmember? Because I don't think he has a funny run in the first one.
Is it the third one that he runs?
So I think you're thinking of when he says, "I wish I was never artificially created."
Yes, that is the third one, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's in Goldmember after he says, "You'll all pay," and then he runs away like that.
That's right. Okay, so he's got two in the third one. His look in the second one. Let me think if there's something in the first one that works for me.
Well, I suppose we can go into the line I just said. When you
Mhm.
really think about it, when somebody says, "I hate you, I wish I was never born," has turned into, "I hate you, I wish I was never artificially created in a lab," which is apparently debunked by the time travel in Dune.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the first one is when he says that artificially created in a lab, because it's after he finds out that the group therapy group is gone.
I think there's also I think it's the group therapy scene is really good in general too, because it's the whole thing of it's like when he's going, he has like a whole evil monologue, and Scott's just like, "This is what I'm talking about." Like that, like the whole joke is the fact that he's this teenager that hates his dad. It just happens to be in this context. And it's like, yeah, it's a very 1997 joke. And obviously doesn't have the luster that it might have once had, but it's like still when you think about the concept of it at the time when it was fresh, it's like that is really fun.
Well, you were talking earlier about the Britney Spears cameo in the third one, with it at least being somebody relevant. In the second one, we have Jerry Springer, who's not really relevant now.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up also. So I got to get your opinion.
I do love all the people that are on the Springer show with him, though.
I was gonna say, despite the fact that it is a pop culture reference that nobody really gives a shit about anymore, it's a long dated reference, especially the places we've seen reality TV go now. That Springer's probably partially the cause of. Is the Springer scene still really funny?
Yeah, I would say so.
Well, first off, one of the things that's very funny is one of the guys, I can't remember if he's one of the Klansmen. I think he's the younger Klansman. Is Scott Cooper, the guy that went on to direct like Crazy Heart and Out of the Furnace.
That's funny.
forever be amazing to me. He's got a new horror movie coming out called Antlers that sounds insane. The way that, once again, the way that escalates should not still be funny in 2021. But when I watch it back, it's still, I think the bit that will always get me for sure is I got your hood, I got your hood. that will, in 2051, that will still be funny to me. And I like how he just happens to find a globe and does the world is mine, motherfucker.
I was going to say the globe is my favorite. Because he ends it with the world is mine, motherfucker. It's one of those cases too where like him being bleeped is funnier than hearing him say that.
Yeah. Same for I know one of your favorite bits in Goldmember, at least back in the day, was always Domino's, motherfucker. Only the It's like, yeah, the fact that it's bleeped makes it even funnier.
Mm-hmm.
There's even the whole scene in the Hard Knock Life scene where it's just all like it's just silence from where he's being beat down.
Little syllables come in here and there. I believe one of the syllables that comes in is just him saying splooge.
Well, speaking of that, let's there's something else I want to bring up, and it was actually the world is mine, motherfuckers, that made me think of it. And I don't think it's something we talked about. Like, it's something people didn't notice at the time. It was only in retrospect.
Well, before you go in here, let's remember that the Jerry Springer scene and him throwing this fit was fresh off a scene where they're all talking about how they can't find him.
The thing I was gonna mention was there is something missing from Goldmember. Like, do you remember watching Goldmember and feeling like it feels like there's something missing?
Mm-hmm.
But I can't pinpoint what it is. And it was only in retrospect, watching the other two movies back, that it feels like it was really late when I finally started seeing people say, oh, yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch Goldmember, do you really miss the little musical interludes?
Yeah, they aren't there, are they?
Yeah, it's like that's my question is why are they not there?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I watch Goldmember, I try to find the places where they would have been.
Mm-hmm.
But the only one that really comes to mind is after Austin meets the mole for the first time. Is the only time I can really see one. But
is that the one that leads into like the submarine jumping out of the water?
I mean, it cuts to the submarine in some way. It might be that one.
The submarine is hilarious that it looks just like him.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Penguin submarine and the '66 Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a reference or not, but they're both funny.
Mm-hmm. And the volcano in the second one.
Yeah, which I
like
believe
they can't find his volcano lair, but the volcano just looks like him.
The volcano also. There's so many references to You Only Live Twice in all three movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting that it's it's like that much of a jumping off point for Bond or something, that there's that many things in it.
Well, it is Blofeld's first on-screen appearance.
Yeah. What do you think about
There's no From Russia with Love references because The Dark Knight took care of that years later with the Joker's Rosicrucian Jew.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the closest you could say is From Russia with Love is part of that early kind of trope in Bond where the henchman always came back at the very end.
True.
Once again, something that's in 1 and 2, but not 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's in the first one, Random Task comes back, and then in the second one, Fat Bastard comes back.
Oh man, talking about From Russia with Love, I just relived that train scene. Man, that train scene's so good. And From Russia with Love.
By the way, Have you read up on the actor that plays Random Task?
He's a wrestler, isn't he?
I can't remember for sure. All I remember is that apparently he was in prison for something.
Oh man.
I don't know if he attacked somebody or tried to kill somebody or what. And then he got his sentence lengthened because he murdered his cellmate.
Holy shit.
It was something like that. It's something crazy.
Holy shit.
So, yeah, Austin got really bent out of shape over that shoe, but it sounds like Austin got off looking.
Yeah.
um, what do you think about? I love that you mentioned Tim Robbins in Anchorman
Hmm.
without failing to mention Tim Robbins in the second Austin Power. He is like kind of he's like the perfect kind of cameo person. It's a full role, but I would throw Tenacious D in there honestly.
Tenacious D just crossed my mind too.
I know you love when he makes fun of Doctor Evil's ransom demand,
Hmm.
and then it's got every line he has. I think is gold because
Yeah,
there's
because Charles Napier asked him if he's suggesting to blow up the moon. His response is just, "Would you miss it?" And I love that he's not like a parody of like Lyndon Johnson. He's just his own thing.
yeah. Do you think there is something about we were talking about
Which if they were gonna go for like a parody on Lyndon Johnson, Charles Napier's right there. He could have done it.
yeah, I could see that. I was thinking there's I was trying to remember what the other one is. Aren't there like two? There's a lot of musical breaks in the second movie. There's the Bacharach Elvis Costello scene, which is a
Mhm.
callback to the Bacharach scene in the first movie, obviously. But then we've got um, the Just the Two of Us scene.
Mhm.
Do you think I don't know? Do you, as far as like Doctor Evil and Mini-Me having a musical moment, do you think the piano scene and the Just the Two of Us scene, do you think we needed both of them? It feels like there's a lot of musical breaks
Mhm.
going on here.
Yeah.
And the fact that those are so close together.
And then they get one in the third one, which I can't complain too much because it did give us Domino motherfucker, but
And there's only one. But and I felt like there was a lot of filler into when I watched it back the most recent time.
mhm.
But there was also stuff where it was I almost felt like there were missed opportunity jokes where it's like, do you commend them for not going with the obvious, or should they have gone with the obvious? Like, because obviously we're making a lot of space references because we're talking about Star Wars in general because it's coming out that year, and we've also got Moonraker. And then you've got the whole scene where Mini-Me has the Hugo Drax fate, where he's spun out into space and it's just his body out there.
Mhm. That he survives.
Only needs a shot for, apparently.
Because I guess he's Leia from The Last Jedi.
But do you think
Carrie
there
Fisher's back around here.
do you think there was some sort of missed opportunity? Like I wanna like the way I imagine it is, and you can feel free to tell me if this wouldn't have been funny. But let's say we got a shot of Doctor Evil, like as far as we know, Mini-Me's just spinning through space.
Mm-hmm.
What if Doctor Evil's in his shuttle or whatever? By the way, the countdown scene is still very funny.
Mm-hmm.
And Doctor Evil's distraught because Mini-Me's gone. And then when he sees Mini-Me in space. Like he looks out his window and sees Mini-Me, and he's like, "Oh, there he is." And the shot of Mini-Me in space is the last shot of 2001. Isn't there some there? You could do something with that.
I thought you were gonna go with the way that Thor meets up with Guardians of the Galaxy in Endgame. Like he just smashes against the windshield.
That'd be funny too. I mean, if they're so obsessed with references in this one,
Mm-hmm.
it's like one's right there.
Yeah.
Do we not go the 2001 route?
Mm.
I was trying to remember if there is a 2001 reference in it somewhere. I feel like there is.
No, you would think that Hal would have been a Leia. Like Hal would have run the space station or something.
Yeah. Who would have been the voice of Dr. Evil's Hal is the question.
Probably Mike Myers doing some kind of voice.
Yeah, probably.
Hmm.
What do you think about the running?
No, it'd have to be the guy from the first one that does the countdown to self-destruct.
What do you think about some of the running jokes that aren't in one but bled in from 2 to 3, like the shadows and the shape of the whatever you call those, the shuttle, the rockets, the satellite.
Yeah, I think that kind of worked for just one movie.
Because it felt like a cop. Did it feel like a cop out by the time we got to the Osborns clipping Goldmember and they're like calling it out?
Yeah.
Another thing where it's like I said, it's not like the Osborns themselves are irrelevant, but that I don't think that reference lands as well.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not Woody Harrelson in the second one.
yeah, because it was like because the Osborns feel kind of shooed in.
Yeah, the second one's done well because not only do you have Woody Harrelson, but if you're eagle-eyed, you notice you also get some Cyclops Jeff Garlin.
Yeah, of course I meant shoehorned just now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like they were just there to kind of like they didn't really tie into what it was. It's like were they saying booze because they're British or something?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the fact that Woody Harrelson tied in as well as he did to the joke itself made sense for a cameo to be there. And it's like I feel like the only reason there's a cameo is because Woody Harrelson set up the precedent. And it's just like, oh, here's the Osborns because
And the Osborns are like watching it on TV, like trying to like break the fourth wall. When Woody Harrelson's cameos, Woody Harrelson's literally just sitting at a cafe.
yeah, doing nothing. He's just staring into the abyss and he gets approached. And it's but I was trying to think of a cameo they could have done that would fit the whole tits narrative. But I don't know.
I mean, when I think of famous person and tits, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Dolly Parton.
But as far as like the word fitting their name, like Woody Harrelson.
They should have waited 3 years, and then they could have done Christina Applegate and done Tits McGee.
There's a lot of Anchorman tie-ins here.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think about the shadows joke? I do think because I can appreciate how far they went with the pregnancy joke, the birth joke,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it took me forever to realize that the doctor in that scene is the penis pump guy in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because
There's a lot of people that come back. Michael McDonald keeps popping up.
Yeah, I love that Michael McDonald's somebody different in all 3 movies. I don't even think he
As
gets.
well, and I love that Clint Howard, I think, is the same person in all 3 movies.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Michael McDonald, we mentioned it. We didn't talk about just how great the steamroller scene is.
Charles Napier's a repeat performer. Is Charles Napier's not the third one though, is he? He's just in 1 and 2.
Yeah, because it's that other guy that says Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that says, "What is it, Dr. Evil?" Another great joke that just goes by. I love how his sigh isn't even that pronounced. It's just enough to say they're sick of Dr. Evil's bullshit.
In the first one, one of the guys in the room that's talking to Dr. Evil on the screen is the guy that Jerry tries to help with the restaurant in Seinfeld. Is his name Babu?
Babu Bot.
Maybe.
And then there was okay, while we're on the topic of like were these working through other movies, just standalone jokes. You'll probably be able to tell I have something particular in mind here. But just talking standalone jokes that are by themselves in one movie. Like the joke is there, and then we go to another joke.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any jokes in this whole trilogy that you see and you just think, holy shit, that bombed so bad? That is a terrible joke. It did not land in any way positively whatsoever. It hit the ground face first so hard. That is a dreadful joke that does not work and should have been cut and never seen.
Why? What are you thinking of?
I was really hoping you'd have one too.
Oh,
You don't have one?
not that I could think of.
The Godzilla joke in the third movie.
Oh, okay.
What even was that? Just that whole fucking thing. Like the whole maybe they had something if it had briefly been the thing where the car's underneath it and Godzilla's going through the city. But to have what's his name? The guy. Well, was he on Heroes or something?
I think.
He's been in something. I think he was in Get Smart, actually. To have them stop and explain the joke like 3 times over, just that whole thing is off. The fact that they're explaining it, I know, is part of the joke, but it's really the whole joke.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't. Nothing about that works. And then when like the way he keeps breaking the fourth wall and saying like, "We know it's not Godzilla, but it is." What even was that? I hate that joke. I really do. Remember everything I felt about the Tom Arnold scene?
Mm-hmm. Opposite.
Oh my god, I hate that joke. You know what else?
Mm.
Really, you know what else really played well? By the way, any answer I might have to this question seems to fall on Goldmember. Another thing that I don't really like is, well, here's the thing. It played really well in 2002. And I remember it playing really well in 2002. But do you think the subtitles joke is really forced with Osato? Or Roboto?
It is, but at the same time, I kind of have to appreciate that I've never seen a movie that plays with subtitles.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it now, but they're like post this movie, so I guess you could say it's something. Well, no, we have Wayne's World.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's in a different way. Like instead of like them translating in interesting ways, it's misreading them.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you could say that's different. But
well, there's also Kung Pao did it too.
I think it's the way, and this might seem a little specific, like too specific of a criticism for a movie like Goldmember,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't it make the joke feel forced that what the subtitles end up saying don't sound like lines that would have been in the scene otherwise?
Yeah.
Like Roboto never would have said your assignment is an unhappy one unless there wasn't some kind of punchline to go with it. Like if it was something that you can imagine a character say, even in a movie like this, if it's something you can imagine a character saying, that's one thing. Like the way they shoehorned the shiitake mushrooms into it, which was a joke Spy Kids had just done the year before.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time I see the shiitake mushrooms joke, I can only ever think they totally just dropped that from Spy, because I had never heard the shiitake mushrooms joke until prior to Spy Kids, and then the very next year, Goldmember just like shoehorns in a reference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. The subtitles joke doesn't really work for me either, so that's annoying. It's annoying when a joke doesn't work, when you know that Mike Myers is clearly a talented comedy writer.
That's just it. Like the team is the same. Like Jay Roach directed all three. Like you would think there would be a little more consistency. It's almost like they peaked at the first one and then had to keep it going, which if I remember reading correctly, the first one wasn't even that big of a hit till it went on VHS.
I'm not sure. That would make sense, probably.
Like it had a good, like its home video life was what spurred the sequels. Because I think at the box office it just did mediocre.
Yeah, that would make sense. Where it was like kind of a word of mouth thing.
Mm-hmm. Because I remember, like when we first saw it, it was on home video. I don't even remember it being in theaters.
Yeah, I remember the neighbors that our parents were friends with had seen it in the theater. I remember that being mentioned like once,
Mm-hmm.
and that they had said it was funny. And then that's, I'm guessing we can assume that's how the video sales went up. Was that's what happened? Is like some people saw it in theaters, but those people that did told everybody and said like this is really. I mean, that's also the thing of where the bond market would have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it would have been. I guess it's decently timed because Goldeneye would have just been a couple of years old, and it would have been the same year. The first one would have been the same year as Tomorrow Never Dies, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of just when Bond was like coming back after the 6 years between Dalton and Brosnan.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which
but
is interesting because I don't think there's any parody for Goldeneye.
yeah, it's like it all goes.
I guess you could loop in a lot of Vagina with Xenia Onatopp, but that's definitely more directed toward Pussy Galore.
Yeah, and it's like the way you can go, the way it goes back to the classics, which is really commendable, because like it would have been so easy to just cash in
Mm-hmm.
on the style of Goldeneye, but it's like the fact that they went back to the basics, because that's where a lot of the old cliches come from.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so much you only live twice in these movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to think. There's always the joke that a henchman gets inadvertently killed. Let's take this back to the steamroller, because there's something I want to mention with the steamroller that's very funny. Obviously the steamroller joke is funny in itself. Michael McDonald's way on the other side of the room, and they're in the steamroller, and it's going really slow, and he's just screaming "stop" from across the room. Basically, waits to be killed, like so many henchmen in the past have. Do you know about the deleted scene that followed that?
No.
Where we see Michael McDonald's family grieving.
No.
Like they've just come from his funeral. They have his pictures all up around the house, and they're just in like deep mourning. And it's like the whole idea that every random henchman that gets killed in a Bond movie has a family.
That's a really funny concept. I wish they would have kept that. I could see where like it might have been like hard to figure out where to put that, but it's a
Yeah.
really funny idea.
Because I don't know if it would have been after he died and then it just cut back to the climax, or if it would have been like the very end.
Mhm. Might have worked well as like an after credit sequence.
Yeah, like if those had been popular at the time, it probably would have.
Hmm.
So yeah, I always appreciated that, and the whole, because there's the whole running joke of one, like a henchman very in the foreground gets killed in every movie, whether it be it's the guy that gets decapitated by the sharks in the first movie, the second
Hmm.
one that Heather Graham lures into the fire, and then the third one that gets zapped by the lasers.
Hmm.
I was getting ready to say, are we about to wrap this up? But we haven't mentioned Fat Bastard much at all. I mean, we've mentioned him in passing, but I feel like it's weird we haven't like devoted time to him yet.
Hmm.
What are your you and all your friends had a phase where Fat Bastard was very, very popular to quote and do impressions of.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that's what this whole trilogy spawned, that whole thing. Like, Austin and Doctor Evil were catchphrase making machines since the
Hmm.
first movie. And then Fat Bastard came in and kind of set up his own direction of that, only throwing in the fact you could do an impression of him on top of it, and the fact that it's abundantly clear that the Fat Bastard voice kind of bled over into the Shrek voice, weirdly enough. What are these days? What's your impressions of Fat Bastard? Like your thoughts on Fat Bastard?
I'm still fine with him in the second one. I feel like they tried to do that again with Goldmember in the third one, and it just didn't work as well.
Yeah, he was clearly in where once again the sumo wrestling scene
Hmm.
is that also not you only live twice.
Yeah.
But then they do the live and let die thing when he runs across like their stomachs.
Hmm.
It's like it's interesting that the Bond stuff is still in there.
But I feel like, well, I need to finish your point before I make my next point. But I think in the second one he's fine. I think when you go back and rewatch it, a lot of it's like he kind of goes on a little too long with things. Like when he sings the chili thing.
Yeah, which once again became one of his catchphrases.
Hmm.
But nowadays it'd be like nowadays people would hate it and say it's blatant product placement.
Yeah, like I think it's one of those cases where you could cut that song out and the scene would get across just fine if it ended with the last thing that he said in that scene being, "You keep your money and I'll get your baby."
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's the whole thing in the third one where he's describing the whole scenario.
Hmm.
Where would you have cut that off? I will say, I do think
Are
it's
you talking
fun.
about when he farts?
Yeah,
I would stop after carrots and throw up.
I will say I do think it's funny that when they end the scene
Hmm.
and he does the whole apartment building thing, and then he says that plus crap, and then
Hmm.
he does this kind of motion like he's gonna do another one, and the scene is cutting him off. But
I
I
would
don't
put,
know that
if you were going to do that, I would put the cut right after he says, when you go into an apartment building.
yeah, that would be really
Hmm.
funny. because you would never know where that was going.
Hmm.
But it's
Like I feel like with Fat Bastard, like yes, he had the accent, but they tried to give him some funny lines to say, and some funny things to do. Like It's really funny that apparently he drinks out of a baby bottle. But then with Goldmember, like they tried to make the whole joke just his accent.
Yeah. And then they did do the weird weight loss thing at the end of 3. I don't know how to. I mean, it's it's a joke for a number of other reasons, also since he name drops Jared specifically. But
I would say the third one has the most jokes that feel dated now, but there are still some really good ones. Like whenever Austin's visiting Dr. Evil in prison and he just runs out the door and no one does anything.
yeah,
That's really funny.
that's a good one.
And he just like backs in.
Because that's another good way where it's like it's clear that they're doing Silence of the Lambs, but it doesn't necessarily. I mean, yeah, it's blatantly obvious they're doing Silence of the Lambs. Sure, the fact that he even does the fly line. But
Which is what he says after he runs out the door. What's funnier, that we see him like back in and no one's responding, or would have been funnier if we would have just cut away from him running out the door?
I kind of like. I'll get it. I think that's pretty funny.
What do you think going into
because I think the reason they had to do him backing in is because if it stopped after he pushed his way out, it would allude to the audience he might have escaped, and it might be confusing if you cut back to him and he's still in prison. So I kind of like that it's like he kind of caught himself and knew it was a mistake.
What do you think of the flashback scenes in the third one, like where they go back to like essentially their version of high school? I love it. That's where we get the origin of why number 2 is number 2, and it's literally he's just number 2 in their class.
I like the fact that that kid's only line is "Hello, I'm number 2."
Fun fact, the kid that plays Austin in the flashback goes on to play a computer operator in The Winter Soldier.
Does he?
Yes.
I was gonna say, I know I've seen young Dr. Evil in other places. Like, I think he's the main character in that movie Sex Drive, if I'm not mistaken. Brings him back to Seth Green.
Yeah, young Austin's in The Winter Soldier.
That's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder what young number 2's up to these days, because he completely delivered that one line. He had one job and he nailed it. I do like the joke of the janitor always being there.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they maybe play up that joke a little too much, like the whole idea that they were roommates and shit like that. Like almost just cutting to them looking at the lists and then cutting to the ceremony. Could have cut that. I mean, I know it's a brief scene anyway, so I'm probably just like nitpicking it, but still, it felt like it's. I don't know. I kind of when we have the flashback, I kind of zone out until we get to the moment when he realizes that Nigel's missing again, and the whole number placement thing. Anything on Michael Caine you gotta say?
Oh, Michael Caine just kind of does his thing.
As I say, first, I love that he was down for this. First,
I think originally they wanted Sean Connery to do it.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody else, but I can't remember who now. But I feel like there's something about Caine that really works, because Caine really sold the deviant side. Looking pretty much exactly like he does in Blame It on Rio, which makes perfect sense, being that that's the kind of movie that it is. His scene with Minnie and me is still really good. Like it's like that's the thing where we talk about scenes that go on and on and on, but it's like I could have probably listened to Michael Caine go through all the euphemisms with Minnie and me like all day. Because he does have like that sophistication, but you can also see where Austin got a bit more of his bumbling side also at the same time, and how Nigel doesn't even seem fazed by the fact that he's been kidnapped.
Mm-hmm. He's another one that does the thing like the Asian guys do, where like he lays out exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I love that he gives him like the cue, like he's like, "Okay, go," and then it happens.
Yeah. And without even trying, like that's more of the way to do that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just recalling more henchman stuff
Mm-hmm.
when Doctor Evil has everybody leave the room when he wants to kick Mini May out,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like not you henchman holding a wrench, not you henchman arbitrarily turning knobs, making it look like you're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the jokes about the henchmen never get old, weirdly enough.
Mm-hmm. But we have to talk about the biggest infraction that the third one does that bleeds over back into Bond.
What's that?
The twist.
Yeah.
I will give credit where it's due though. That's an interesting way. They don't flat out say it, but that's an interesting way to explain why it's the same actor playing both roles.
Yeah. What do you think, since he was so heavily considered, um, what do you think Jim Carrey's Doctor Evil would have been like? I'm wondering would he have still had the Donald Pleasance look?
I feel like it would have been a mixture between Chip Douglas and the Riddler.
Yeah, like the more over the top stuff is the Riddler, and then when he's like monologuing like in the group, his Chip Douglas would come out.
Yeah.
I've always had, weirdly enough, I've always had trouble visualizing it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's because we just see Mike Myers now, and Mike Myers has the perfect build for the Donald Pleasance Blofeld.
Yeah, and I think too, like in the first one, like I mean, Doctor Evil has funny things that happen, but he's primarily like a straight man in the first one. And by the third one, he's as loopy as everybody else.
Isn't it jarring to watch the opening scene of the first movie after you've watched all three? Because
Yeah.
it's like Doctor Evil actually seems like a real villain. He even kills it. He kills the dude disguised as the waitress.
Mm-hmm.
I know Doctor Evil's like regularly killing people with like the chairs and everything, but I mean he like shoots a dude.
Mm-hmm. Like
it seems like he's really hard to capture.
the point that I was gonna make though is it's really funny that the way the third one is shot and the way that it wraps it up makes it seem like they've watched it happen in a movie, and the third one feels like one where the studio just got a little over involved in what they wanted to happen,
So you think it kind
opposed
of
to like just letting the people that did the first one work on it.
so what you're saying is you basically felt like you were watching Austin Puss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. That's profound.
Mhm. Not to
So
mention you've got John Travolta popping up at the end.
yeah, which is a good callback, and another good.
Yes, but do you know what it makes me kind of wish? I wish John Travolta would have just played Goldmember.
Yeah, because I actually wanted to go into that a little bit. It's another case. It's so interesting to think about watching this in 2002 in theaters multiple times with a crowd where every joke worked. And then I look back, like looking at Goldmember just in general, like I remember it being funny when he comes out and his first line is, "I'm from Holland, isn't that weird?"
Mm-hmm.
Don't I don't really get what, what is do you get anything out of that now or
And then
like
just a little random dance.
And then the whole skin bit,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't get Goldmember as a character anymore.
I feel like too. This is something else we haven't touched on yet. Um, I feel like Elizabeth Hurley's really good in the first one as like a counterpart to him, kind of like keep him grounded and keep him moving. I think she's definitely the best one for him to go through that crisis of changing times. I think Heather Graham in the second one definitely resembles like something that he would be into during his own time. Beyonce just gets annoying in the third one.
Yeah, because because you get how they're trying to bring another era of spy movie in with her
Hmm.
and kind of shake things up a little bit.
It's she definitely is supposed to be from like a blaxploitation movie.
Yeah, and be like a Pam Grier character.
Hmm.
But apart from her catchphrases, I don't really get that vibe.
Hmm. I
Because
do one thing that she does do in the movie that I like is the scene where Mini Me gives her the note and the way that she reads the punchline, like how she just kind of stops and trails off.
because the whole thing is it's like the way Vanessa kept him grounded because Elizabeth Hurley is so good at like no bullshit,
Hmm.
and it's like that's really missed in regards to like his banter
Hmm.
because there's not really much to Felicity either.
No, because she's already super into him. Like with Vanessa, he has to win her over.
Yeah, if anything, it's like weirdly enough, the most development he gets as far as Felicity goes is the fact that he loses his mojo, and it's like the reverse of what it was.
Honestly, the third one, Beyonce's best scene in that movie is for her character, not even her, and it's the Nathan Lane scene.
Yes, I wanted to bring up the Nathan Lane scene.
Anytime's a good time when you can talk about Nathan Lane.
Yeah. I
You
feel
know
like I
where,
kept saying like
do you
I've
know
got to.
where else Nathan Lane is hilarious besides everything? He's really hilarious too on Modern Family when he has his little freakouts.
Yeah, because I was just gonna say like I've been saying this whole time like I got to bring up the Nathan Lane scene.
Hmm.
Then it's like now that we have, it's like I don't even know what to say because Nathan Lane speaks for himself.
He does. It's like his version of the Tom Arnold scene from the first one.
And it's just that one joke. I mean, it's so simple, but it might be one of my favorite jokes in the whole Austin Powers trilogy.
Hmm.
When he's doing the makeup and he closes it, and Beyonce says "ow." It's just like, and the fact that Austin like notices and then lets it go.
The end is good too when he just grabs Austin and just starts making out with him.
And spanks himself.
Yeah.
The whole scene works. It's comedic gold.
Is it because it's Nathan Lane?
That probably has a lot to do with it. I mean, it's a funny
Nathan,
concept of a scene.
Nathan Lane is really good. What I love about Nathan Lane is whatever Nathan Lane is doing, he is going full tilt. Like Nathan Lane does not pull punches. Like he goes all in.
I think that's what it is because I was feeling like it's a clever joke, but I feel like if it was any other person, it wouldn't feel like it peaks.
Hmm.
But because Nathan Lane's presence in general just kind of feels like a constant peak at all times,
Hmm.
it's like it didn't really need. I guess the final payoff is which is what you look for in a joke that's kind of ongoing. It's like what's going to be the final payoff of this joke? I guess the final payoff is that he tries to make out with him and spanks himself.
Hmm.
But I mean, just how over the top Nathan Lane can go makes the whole thing feel like a payoff.
Hmm.
Like the makeout scene couldn't have been there, and he could have just walked away, and that I would have. That's like, yeah, that was a satisfying joke. So it's like the fact that it did have one more payoff is just kind of the cherry on top. So
And then like right before it cuts away, he just gives him that little look.
and that's another good moment from Beyonce when we focus on her face and the makeout's happening in the background, and she's trying to decipher what's like she might have an idea of what's happening, but she can't quite tell.
That is a really funny angle to get on that joke.
And of course, the whole bringing up time travel thing. Everybody praises the scene in Looper
Mm-hmm.
when Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt sit down in the diner, and Bruce Willis says, "We're gonna be here all day if we try to go through every single facet of this time travel shit. So let's just do the story,
Mm-hmm.
and not go into the basics." And this even touches on that when they go through it, and then Basil says it's best not to think too much about it, and then they break the fourth wall and say that goes for you too.
That was in the second one, wasn't it?
I think it's the third because I'm pretty sure he's in the Pinmobile at the time.
I thought he was in the Bug.
I'm pretty sure it's the third, actually. You'd think they would have addressed that in the second one, but apparently they waited till. I'm pretty sure it's in the third.
Mm.
So,
Let's talk about how in the second one all he had to do was drive straight, and the first thing he does is just turn into like all this scientific equipment. Like, he fucks up in the first second.
I keep feeling like we're reaching a stopping point, but then there's so many jokes that I keep forgetting about.
Mm.
Of course, the third one does what we talked about the second one not doing with the Vanessa joke, which is Felicity just disappears.
Mm-hmm.
Just gone completely.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, weirdly enough, she seems like she'd be the one that he'd be most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
It's his equal. But that's, maybe he needs a Vanessa is what he needs. Did you ever get the idea?
Speaking of Vanessa, there is one scene that I find myself in agreement with Austin, and it's the end. It's during the credits of the first one, and he's taking the pictures, and she's in like the bikini or something. He's just like, "Good Lord!" Like I find myself saying that now too.
Yeah, it's like you've looked at the back of the DVD case for Bedazzled more than once, haven't you?
Dude, I follow her on Instagram. She's still got it, man.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of recent pictures. This is gonna get real pervy real fast.
No, we'll leave now.
But no, one thing I was gonna say was as far as Austin having an equal, as far as a female counterpart, do you get the idea? There's something that's never addressed, but do you get the idea when Vanessa and Mamie Rogers are talking on the phone in the first one, and Austin's like in the background?
Mm-hmm.
The way Mamie Rogers talks, are we under the impression that Austin's like the one that got away from her?
I'm not sure.
It's like, and how does she feel? Like if that, like her daughter was banging the one that got away. But then once again, that's the whole thing of, is Vanessa even real? And what's that make Mamie Rogers? Who knows? I guess we can just write off the Kensingtons, I guess.
Yeah. Because they're never mentioned again.
No.
Do you think the fourth one's ever going to get made that they keep talking about? Because I don't.
It's going to be a fucking disaster if it does. Let me tell you, at the rate delayed sequels have been going. As I was thinking about it the other day, there is only one like 20 plus years sequel I can think of recently that worked. But apart from, I don't like, they all, like, it's not even just that they're not as good or whatever. They fucking suck, like, aggressively.
What's the one you can think of that works?
Interestingly enough, Trainspotting 2 is really, really good.
Would you count The Force Awakens if you look at it as a sequel to Jedi?
I mean, those are already spaced far out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that's hard to say since that's like always been their format.
I know another one for you that's kind of a sequel that works, that I know that you believe works. And that's Doctor Sleep.
Yeah, that's true. So Ewan McGregor's only making the good long delayed sequel. Makes sense. Ewan McGregor.
Which is funny because if we go with Star Wars, Ewan McGregor even plays a role in that. Not directly to what we're talking about, but
I was gonna say with Trainspotting 2 and Doctor Sleep, Ewan McGregor also has to be fighting addiction. So Ewan McGregor, who just had a kid with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, what's that about? I thought they were broken up like a year ago.
I don't know.
This took a turn, so I guess we're done.
Well, she probably rewatched one of his movies where his dick pops out and was like, yeah, I could go for that again.
Oh, she's got a whole library of those.
When's Ewan McGregor going to get his due?
Oh, he's doing really well these days as far as choosing projects. They just aren't being like financially successful for some reason.
That, it always seems like there's someone there to overshadow him. I would still nominate him in supporting for Big Fish. I would to this day.
And there's Fargo, but then a lot of people didn't like that season, even though he is amazing in it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think people are used to our videos enough now.
I still haven't watched it yet, but from what you've told me, he's a lot of fun in Birds of Prey.
Very much. But yeah, I feel like enough people have probably watched our videos to know that usually the last 20 minutes or so is just stuff that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Let's not forget, Ewan also has Moulin Rouge in his back pocket.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say his back pocket. I'd say that at least the side pocket. But
what's Ewan carrying in his front pocket?
Probably Star Wars.
Is it? There's a lot of people that say that he's the best part of the prequels.
Oh yeah, most people. Then we'll see how the show does.
Yeah, I've seen where his show is one that's highly anticipated because people like him as Obi-Wan.
I was trying to, how a long delayed sequels is how we got. I like to retrace our steps and see how the hell we got here. Long delayed sequels, yeah. I don't think an Austin Powers 4 would work, by the way. That's a long story short.
No, and I worry to see what would be referenced with everything being so centered around meme culture these days.
Because if you look at the quality now, I mean, you said what you did about the second movie. Do you put the second movie first, or do you rank them in chronological order?
They're in chronological order, but I still have a soft spot for the second one.
It's just so weird to me how far down Goldmember went. Because it was like the whole.
It definitely is hurt the most through rewatches.
Because it was the holy grail of comedy in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So is that it?
Yeah, I think we've covered all of our bases.
All right. I don't know what the next thing we're doing is. I had a suggestion in mind, and I've since forgotten what it was.
I'd still like to tackle Rocky Horror and Shock Treatment at some point.
Yeah, I want us to do that in like October if you want.
Hopefully Shock Treatment will still be free on YouTube for you at that point.
Yeah. And I can't remember if I mentioned this to you while I was down there or not. I would like to do the Predator franchise in October. Just the 4, not Alien versus Predator or anything. So
it'd be Predator, Predator 2, Predators, and what?
The Predator, the one that came out a few years ago.
Oh, I'm not even sure where to find that one.
So surely by October it'll be on some random streaming service or something. You've got almost every streaming service under the sun, so if you don't find it,
Yeah, since you helped with HBO Max, that's helped. I used to have on demand to help too, but we cut our cable package, so I don't have as much there now.
So hopefully I remember what that other one was, and then I can run that by you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess we can go from there, or if you have any ideas.
I'm sure we'll get something figured out.
I say we have that list, but we've like strayed away from it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So
I still wish there was something out there to do with Scott Pilgrim. I would love to talk about Scott Pilgrim.
every now and then I just want to give in and might just talk about the movie by itself. But sure we can figure. I know there's got to be like I feel like there's something on the tip of my tongue that would go with Scott Pilgrim, and I can't think of what it is.
I don't know. Google doesn't help. It just gives me a bunch of Edgar Wright movies.
I fucking hate that shit. They either give you the director's movies or the actor, one of the actresses' movies.
Yeah.
It's like, go fuck yourself. So,
Well, I'm sure in a few weeks when it wraps, we'll probably do a Loki video. We did WandaVision and we did Winter Soldier.
yeah, I was probably counting on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess we will go from there.
Which, being the halfway point, Loki's pretty good. I'm waiting for it to pick up a little bit.
This is the area we're headed in is usually about the time it starts.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also a lot of stuff that has strong openings and then just plummet. But we'll see which one this ends up being.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier didn't disappoint, so I don't imagine Loki will either.
Let's hope not.
Nah.
All right, so until we figure out what the next thing is, I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right.